Happy Halloween, everybody! I'm the Average Joe, your friendly neighborhood jack of all fandoms. Today I'm going to be ranking all the Disney and Pixar villains that I find relevant. Anyone that I didn't know or just didn't care enough to mention was simply dropped from the list. I really don't want this video to just become a giant game of me saying, I hate this guy, or, who are you people? That's about the closest that I'm going to get to a Patrick impersonation. Anyway. I also slipped in a couple at the end from the Disney Channel that I thought were worth mentioning, just to fill out the ranks. If you guys in the comment section have any other villains within these categories that you want to see, drop them in the comments below. Hey, if I get enough suggestions, I may do a part 2. But enough chatting, let's get into this. Starting with Pete. If you're wondering why I put him first, it's because he is first. Yeah, Pete is the oldest Disney character to still be around today. They made him a full 3 years before Mickey. An interesting thing to note about him is that he's never had a definitive species or stayed tied to a certain main character. You see, when he was fighting Alice and Oswald the Rabbit, he was a bear. Then when Mickey came along, he became a cat. And then when they had him antagonizing Goofy in the 90s, he became part of the Goof species. And now that he's back to fighting Mickey again, he's a cat. But the one underlying thing in all those cartoons is that he's never completely a villain. Even when he's up against Mickey, the two seem to have more of a hard rivalry than a good and evil mentality. It's like Bluto in the old Popeye shorts. He does some bad stuff, but the two can at least get along when there's no stakes. I personally give him a B ranking, just because his character's never really been developed all that much. In some ways, I'd argue Bluto is a more interesting character between the two, but this ain't about him. Moving on. Now, the Evil Queen set the trend for what a Disney villain is supposed to look like in their fairy tales. She's not all that interesting a character, but there's also much worse. Overall, she's kind of generic, all things considered, I guess. Next up, I got Satan. I know they call him Chernabog for marketing reasons later on, but come on, he's so clearly the devil. Imagine if the company put out something like Night in Bald Mountain today. The shareholders would never let it pass. Anyway, people seem to be really split on where to put Satan. They either want to put him really high because, come on, it's Lucifer in a Disney movie, or really low because he's not on screen all that much. I'm kind of stuck between those two mentalities myself. I don't think C is right for him, but I'm not sure he's compelling enough to be an S either. B seems just about right. Okay, moving on. Lady Tremaine I don't want to put in SS, but I think she certainly earned a spot in the S ranks. And while we're talking about her, I'd just like to say she is one of the few villains that the Disney remakes did well. Galadriel put in a fantastic performance. You know, I will say, the Queen of Hearts is the one person out of this bunch that'll probably benefit the most from therapy of some kind. A few centuries in anger management might serve her well. I find her character fun to watch, I just don't think she's extremely interesting. On the other hand, though, I kind of want to know more about her husband. How did he win her favor? How does he stay on her good side? What is their marriage like? Come on, guys, this is the long-lost Disney romance that we need. Maleficent. I don't think I need to explain this, but she's automatically granted a spot in the top rank. It's the same voice actress as Lady Tremaine, but, given that there's a bit more depth to her character now. From the way she talks, I'm pretty sure she just wanted to be included in things, that's it. When the fairy says she's not wanted, she looks genuinely hurt. Like if the king and queen had just invited her to the party in the first place, Maleficent might have just stayed in her castle and left them alone. If anything, they're the villains for being jerks about it. I might have actually liked the Maleficent movie if they stuck to this version of the character. I need a drink. When people are talking about all these villains, I don't see anybody bring Captain Hook up all that often. I know we came from a pretty by-the-numbers Disney film. Peter Pan isn't exactly the most popular today, but come on. Hans Conried put in a good performance. Captain Hook is funny, he's smart, manipulative, clearly a PTSD victim of some kind, so that's the thing. He's also the first villain in the lineup to actually kill a man on screen, so good for him. Okay, Cruella de Vil I hear a few more people talking about. I do love her theme song just like everybody else and how they actually work it into the plot, but I think she's a good character in herself, and that's what most people forget. The one thing that bothers me about her is the fact that Roger calls her Anita's schoolmate, which means she's somewhere close to Anita's age. Either Roger and Anita are way older than we give them credit, which I don't think is possible, Or she's really just this far gone from her current lifestyle. Don't smoke, kids. Don't drink too much either. You you could become a puppy murdering fashion consultant. Okay, next one I've got here is the marvelous Madame Mim. I remember liking this film a lot more as a child. I will say, Madame Mim is another one who was barely in her story because the film was more focused on the main characters than anything else. I want to like her, and that magic duel was legit cool. I just don't think there's enough work in with her to warrant anything above C. Sorry. Shere Khan, on the other hand, yeah, he isn't in the film that long, but I also give him this huge build-up beforehand. Every time his name is mentioned on screen, all the characters freak out. Even Ka's scared of him. He's been our big villain so far in this film before Shere Khan comes on screen. And when Khan is actually on screen, they play him up more like a serial killer, and I love it. He reminds me a lot of Dr. Regis Blackguard. I'm sure most people in this audience are thinking, who's he? Please go listen to Adventures in Odyssey. The old school material, not whatever it is they think they're doing now. But the two are very similar in that they both know that they're in control, and they're upper-class English gentlemen, and they're kind of just they very much like playing around with their food, one way or the other. Not that Dr. Blackguard was a cannibal, he's just a terrorist. If you guys are like me and you were disappointed by the way that they use him in the remake, the Netflix film Mowgli has a much better take on Shere Khan. He's played by Benedict Cumberbatch in that one. And he loses all the suave and class, but they play him like this, like an actual blood-hungry monster, and I like it. Robin Hood is another film that a lot of people try to sleep on. I get that Prince John is very silly and childish, but that's kind of the point, though. He's an inbred, spoiled man-child. He's desperately clinging to a crown that's too big for him, literally. And for what it's worth, when he's actually serious about what he's doing, he can be very effective at it. Oh, and I should mention this now. At the very end, I'll go over each individual rank to decide who's the best in each one, but right now I'm just putting them in chronologically. Amos isn't exactly taken seriously for most of the film, but he is actually a decent hunter and has, I don't want to call it good chemistry with both the dogs and the old lady, but I'll be kind and say he's a B-tier villain. I admit that the Horned King is the best part of his movie. Not that that's a hard decision, considering how badly it was slashed apart by Katzenbug. Hey, Robin Williams started that joke, not me. I'm just the messenger. He's incredibly well animated, John Hurt gives a chilling performance, he's just kind of held back by the studio's incompetence. But hey, now we're hitting what most people call the golden age of Disney villainy. I call it that. I don't know why I'm saying people. But a lot of what I'm going to say about all of these guys is basically the same thing. They're a complex character, they're written really funny, have a great performance, yada yada yada. Ratigan is obviously based on the character of Professor Moriarty, because this is an adaptation of the Basil of Baker Street books. He's clearly the most sadistic out of any villain. He is canonically confirmed to drown widows and orphans for fun. They put that in his big song. If the film were made today, I think you would definitely see Tumblr falling all over him. They'd be saying, he's a precious cinnamon roll. He's just misunderstood and clearly in love with Basil, when he's actually just a monster with no mercy or regret. All I'm saying here is that Vincent Price is just charming enough to make the fangirls fall for him. And you know that Ursula has to be up here too. Somewhere in the past, she was apparently the Queen of Atlantis, until she was overthrown by Triton, which means they're both the children of Poseidon, which makes them, I guess, Hercules' cousin on their father's side? I don't know. Where are we? McLeach. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that the Rescuer films are a cinematic masterpiece or anything, but McLeach is an effective villain. Part of that has to do with the fact that it's George C. Scott behind the mic, and he's enjoying the role almost as much as Vincent enjoyed Ratigan, but he almost kind of walks this weird line between being completely ruthless and having an actual heart. He was totally fine letting the kid walk away unscathed at the start. It's not until he realizes the kid has the feather that he starts contemplating child murder. Also, something you may notice from the upper ranks here is that child murder gets a villain very high on the list for me. I like it when the villain tries to kill a child. I don't know what that means for me personally. Gaston is next. In my opinion, Gaston was the first attempt from Disney to pull a twist villain. If you look at the behind-the-scenes material, you'll see that they worked very hard to make him appear like a Disney hero, so that the people watching for the first time would be legit surprised when he becomes the main threat at the end. He and the Beast both have the red shirts and the blue eyes, which is supposed to mean that they both have this potential in them to be good or bad. But throughout the film, Beast changes to a purple and then to a blue because he's actually willing to change, and Gaston isn't. And in case you're wondering why his voice sounds so much different from all the other Disney villains we've seen so far, it's because he's like an actual opera singer that the studio picked up to play Gaston. I think his name's like Richard White, if I remember correctly. But yeah, he has that like deep vibrato that nobody else has in these movies. Okay, what on God's green earth am I going to be able to say about Jafar? Obviously another top tier one. And I know I praised all the other actors up to this point, but Jonathan Freeman is literally so good at this part that Disney refused to cast anybody else for a solid 20 years. I mean, even the Broadway show brought him back. How many actors do you see actually make the transition from the movie to the stage adaptation? Of course, they did completely drop the ball and butcher him in the remake, but what are you going to do, I guess? The Boogeyman gets an S rank. Something I've been thinking about with him lately is the fact that he very well could have been the Harvey Dent of the Disney universe. If he had leaned more into that follow the dice mentality, he could really be an interesting character to explore. I'm sorry, I have a bit of a stutter. I don't know why I do these live recordings or anything. But as it stands, I do still enjoy his performance. A little fun fact from my VeggieTales fans in the audience, because I know there's at least 700 of you watching from the other video I uploaded. His voice was the direct inspiration for Mr. Nezer. Okay, Scar I know is usually in everybody's top 5, I just don't see it personally. He takes a lot of inspiration from the King and Hamlet because that's exactly what they're trying to do with this story. But he took a lot of the King's worst traits as well. When he's actually got the throne in question, he's kind of way too whiny and kind of snivelly. I can't really take him seriously anymore. It's kind of like Crowley in the last couple seasons of Supernatural. Oh, by the way, Supernatural's coming to an end. Do you guys want me to talk more about that show on this channel? Please let me know. Anyway, Governor Ratcliffe is on the opposite end of this spectrum. Everyone's gonna want me to put him in the bottom ranks. I don't think he's that terrible as a villain. Come on, you guys just need to be nicer to Pocahontas in general. Hey look, we're in the Pixar era now. I'm gonna be honest, I don't really know where to put Sid. The thing that makes him a good villain is that he's not a villain. He obviously comes from a bad background. His biggest crime is just tampering with toys he didn't know were alive. Clearly he had an interest in surgery. Maybe if Woody hadn't freaked him out so bad, he might have been a world-class doctor instead of a garbage man at the end of his life. You know, the more I talk about him, the more I'm realizing he is a very well-developed antagonist. Let's just put him up at the top. Frollo. SS? I don't really know what to say about this guy anymore because everybody else has already talked about him for so long. Yeah, he's fantastic. Top tier. Hades is very funny. I'll give you that James Woods' performance is great. I'm just not sure he's menacing enough or complex enough to hit the top ranks. The film is kind of a hot mess, and I think Hades kind of suffers for it. Not as badly as the other characters in this film, but I think it really needed another rewrite or two before it hit the theater. Next up, Mulan. Well, not Mulan. Shan Yu. But Mulan is a film that focuses almost solely on Mulan herself, which makes for good storytelling, but it also means that we lose a lot of the character we could have gotten out of Shan. He's got several good lines, and he looks really cool, but he's treated less like a person and more like a force in nature to move the plot. Not that that's the worst thing you can do, but a generous A spot is the highest you can get here. Back to Pixar. Bug's Life is a better movie than you guys give it credit for. And the best thing in this film is how Hopper's played up as a villain. Hopper has this oddly poignant writing behind his motivations about how a few loud voices can scare the majority into submission. Oh yeah, that kind of aged well, given what's going on in America right now. Sorry, I'm not gonna get into politics on this channel, but just throw him in the SS. I think you know what I'm talking about. Clayton. Clayton had potential. He's just boring. He did have a cool death scene. He literally hung himself, but that's about it. I don't even feel the need to expand on that. Tarzan's just kind of mediocre. Fight me. So we're 3 Pixar films in, and we already got our first twist villain. I know, they got it in early. Yay! But the Prospector is actually really good for what it's worth. I wish the trope was handled better in the other films later down the line, but you know what? Fine, I'll leave Pete in S ranks. Yzma I want to put high up, but when I reviewed her character, I kind of realized that the thing that makes her so memorable, other than being played by a funny comedian, is how well she bounces off of Kronk. Don't get me wrong, I love these two on screen together. I think Eartha Kitt and Patrick Warburton have great chemistry, but that doesn't really make her an SS villain on her own. Monsters Inc. Okay. I wanted to keep it to 1 villain per movie on this list, which is why you don't see Ka or the Cheshire Cat or the Cheshire Cat or the Sheriff of Nottingham. Randall I put on instead of Mr. Waternoose just because he's the more prominent threat in the film. If I were to put Waternoose on this list, he'd probably be S tier, but back to Randall. He's not particularly well written, but I find him to be a good middle ground between funny and kind of creepy. Not really intimidating, just generally creepy. What's next on my Long John Silver? I admit that Tim Curry's version is more entertaining to watch, like how he's in the Muppet version, but you guys need to give Treasure Planet some respect. Long John Silver is already one of the best villains ever written, but this version is a really good adaptation of his character. If you haven't seen it, do it. Oh, here we have the magnum opus of Pixar villains, Syndrome. This guy has more in common with a comic book villain, and I freaking love it. I wish he had his own movie. Where else do you get to see a villain commit actual genocide on a Disney film? Please, Pixar, let Brad Bird do what he wants with his movies. Sorry, moving on. Does anyone else remember Meet the Robinsons? No? Just me? Well, too bad. Bowler Hat Guy is going right here. Gee, if I rank too many people in these upper ranks, we're gonna have to move the screen a bit. Or maybe we could just use our imaginations and pretend these, cogwheel things aren't here. Can you guys do that? Pixar again. I've said a few times that I like the villains that aren't necessarily evil, and I think a lot of people treat Chef Skinner too harshly. Nothing he's doing is technically illegal, he's just kinda greedy. For what it's worth, he actually does listen to his staff, and he does seem to at least care about keeping the business alive after Cousteau's passing. Next up, Charles Muntz. Fun fact about this guy. He's named for Charles Mintz, the guy who stole Oswald the Lucky Rabbit from Walt Disney and forced him to create a new mascot character. I mean, the new mascot that he ended up creating was Mickey, so you can guess which one got the last laugh in the end there. He's not in the film all that long, but I kind of like the idea of this guy who's gone crazy in the jungle. The guy who's gone crazy without having to be like a full jungle savage. He and his dogs make for a good threat, and, like I said earlier, child murder. Okay, I know a lot of people sleep on Princess and the Frog as well, because this is the point where everybody said, hey, we don't want to watch hand-drawn films anymore. They're for babies. Screw all of you guys, by the way. You guys killed an entire medium of storytelling. You forced a lot of really good animators to retire. Sorry, I'm getting on a tangent again. This film is really good. The highlight is Facilier. He's cool, he's suave, he's got some great visuals in his voodoo scenes, and he's got the best villain death we've ever seen. Other villains simply fell to their death. This guy got dragged into hell kicking and screaming. And the whole time he's getting dragged in, all the demons that he's been working with are just chanting his own villain song back at him. I love it. We need more of this. Just this cool, dramatic irony. Lotso Huggenbear. Let me tell you a little bit about Lotso Huggenbear and why he works better than most Disney villains. And I'm going to be talking a bit more about the Toy Story films in general here. Throughout the Toy Story trilogy, everything is done through the eyes of Woody, and all the major threats directly relate to his development. Sid's like an antithesis to Andy, because not every kid loves their toy or even plays nicely. Pete is what happens when a toy never gets the love that Woody takes for granted. But in another way, I'd argue that Pete is the counter to Woody's ideology. where he wants to unconditionally love your kid. The prospector is offering Woody a life of immortality, but one without any love or friendship. Lotso, on the other hand, a lot of his character is built on what Woody was supposed to be. If you don't know, back in the original drafts for Toy Story, Woody was going to be the main villain. So Lotso has his brain, his ego, and his need for control. It's all just twisted to an insane degree by the abandonment. Think of it like a funhouse mirror image, or even just a bleak possible outcome for Woody's character arc. I honestly just wish that we could have seen more of Lotso and Woody on screen together. The only two scenes I can think of off the top of my head that they were together is like the first scene when everybody's first showing up at Sunnyside, and then at the very end when they're out going to the trash. Don't think there was any other scenes. Still, I can't deny how much thought they put into it. I really have to put him at the top. I wish that this much thought went into Toy Story 4, but there's only so much you can do when your main creative genius is in jail. And I am out of water. That makes me sad. Back on topic. Where are we? Mother Gothel. Mother Gothel I call the death of classic villains, because she was the last one I would call phenomenal. For me, she's about on equal footing with Lady Tremaine in character writing. The thing that just bumps her up a tier is the song. I like Mothers Know Best. Sue me. Here on out, we're back down to a level of meh. King Candy, for example, is more an example of a typical Pixar villain done poorly than a Disney one done well. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. The same kind of goes for Prince Hans, too. When we actually see him being evil at the end, he almost seems like... I don't know, he seems like he walked out of a Game of Thrones episode. But for nearly the whole film, he's just acting like a generic nice guy. And he's kind of boring. Maybe if this film were to come out a few years earlier, or if he had sown some better hints in that he's evil, the way they did with Waternoose and Months, I might buy it. Actually, if Frozen were a better movie, I'd probably buy it. And just to be clear, no, Love is an Open Door does not count as a villain song. Please. Callahan is another one kind of like that. He has a little bit of an overlap with Syndrome in that he's mainly trying to be a comic book villain. I mean, he is a comic book villain. Big Hero 6 was a comic first. But he's just not really interesting enough that I want to watch him more on screen. Sorry. Okay, maybe I misspoke when I said that we were in a whole era of meh. I kind of forgot that these two were coming. I wish Tamatoa had been in this film longer, but, he did completely sell me on those few minutes he had. I mean, it's a cannibal crab David Bowie impersonator. What can I say? I like it. Next on is Ernesto De La Cruz. Sorry if you haven't seen Coco yet, but if you haven't, what's wrong with you? You'll notice that most of the guys people call Pixar villains, or even just some of the Disney villains, didn't really make the cut because I had nothing to say about them. But Ernesto De La Cruz is a good example of the twist villain done right. I believe it was Shea Frillis who said this in his video about twist villains, but the thing that makes this guy stand out from all the other villains is that he's already won. He killed the guy he wanted to kill, he made all the money, and he's basically retired now. His part of the story is just him trying to, cover his tracks, I guess, so he can continue living in sin. You know what? Good for him. But then we get to Screenslaver. Good lord, what a letdown compared to Syndrome. Okay, I'll be nice. She's not nearly as bad as other people make her out to be. She's just kind of lame. Her name is literally Evil Endeavor. That's not clever. It's about the level that we're working with Edward Nygma. Okay, here's what I was talking about way earlier on in this video. These guys don't appear in a movie, but I needed to fill out the ranks. I wanted to get an even number of characters, and these guys did not have to be nearly as well thought out as they were, considering that they were made for Disney Channel. Let's start with Bill. If you want a really intricate analysis of why Bill's cipher is so effective, I guess you can probably watch Nux Taku's video series on it. he calls him a lot of things: a tragic god, an overpowered antagonist, a misunderstood character, but I just really enjoy Bill for how well he's written. I would argue that Bill Cipher could actually give Mark Hamill's Joker a run for his money, in how smart he is, how funny he is, and how terrifying he is. I'm honestly surprised they got away with putting this into a show that's like, what, TVY7? Now if you'll excuse me, I have some children I need to make into corpses! Dr. Doofenshmirtz. When I was making this list, I had to ask myself several times, can I actually put him here? Is he actually a villain? I mean, we see through all his backstories how he was neglected and abused by his family as a child. He still very much has a heart for the people who are actually there for him, like Perry and Vanessa. Most of the time, he's honestly just seeking petty revenge for personal gripes. But on the other hand, yeah, when he takes things seriously, he can be actually terrifying. Let's just think about the logistics here. Doof is the leader of all the villains in his community. He's nearly caused the apocalypse at least twice throughout the show. He built a device that drained the Avengers' power and got the attention of Red Skull and MODOK. In the second dimension, we even see that an unhinged Doofenshmirtz could actually conquer and rule a fascist regime if he really wanted to. You know how I mentioned Shea Frillis earlier? I remember seeing a tweet from him several months ago where he mentioned that he considers Dr. D a more complex character than Arthur Fleck from the Phoenix Joker film. And I wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment. Darkwing Duck gave us a lot of really good villains, but I love the idea that the only person who can really get to Darkwing and match him as an equal is Darkwing himself. Because, you know, it's an Earth 2 doppelganger who went insane and took over his own planet. He's kind of like Owlman, or the Bat Who Laughs, I guess. Now this guy over here, you might be saying, who's he? This, my friend, is General Lunaris from the DuckTales reboot. My biggest complaint with this series is that it really doesn't understand how to make its main characters look good without dumbing down the villains. Magica De Spell and Ma Beagle are the closest thing you get to a competent group from the old cast, but Glomgold's a walking slapstick fest, and Steelbeak fell just short of being handled well. I need to make a video at some point talking about this, but thank God Lunaris doesn't suffer from any of that. This guy outplayed Scrooge and the family at every turn. He takes their psychology in mind from the very beginning, how he's gonna plan against them, and yeah, he has completely understandable motives. He's racist. They found a way to make the racism make sense, where growing up he was afraid of the people of Earth, and that built into a resentment over time. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to being stuck in orbit around the planet for the rest of eternity. I get the feeling he and Grand Admiral Thrawn would get along swimmingly. If he had been allowed to stick around longer so we could focus more on his character, he could easily match the SS characters. But as it stands, we have just enough room to squeeze him into the S tier. Seriously though, DuckTales, learn to balance your characters better. I'm definitely going to make a video about this some point. Okay, now we just need to figure out where everyone matches up to each other in their specific ranks, and we're done. The only thing I'd really change about this bottom rank is that I want to put Mim at the front. Evil Queen slightly better than Ratcliffe, Ratcliffe slightly better than Clayton. B tier I'm gonna leave as is, honestly. A tier is where I want to start making some revisions. I'll put Callahan above Hans and Candy above Callahan, but Shan, I guess, is a little less interesting than Candy. Then Queen of Hearts. Then Prince John, and well, I guess Bowler Hat Guy's at the top here. His real name is Mike, by the way. Mike. Here's where this gets tricky. How do I rank the S villains? At the top, we'll put Shere Khan, then Cruella. You know what? No, I'll put Lady Tremaine. No. Listen to me. Here we go. Hades. Scar. Maybe not La Cruz yet. Captain Hook. Oogie Boogie. Yzma. Negaduck. Tamatoa. Randall. Skinner. McLeach. Lunaris. The Prospector. Charles. Yeah, then De La Cruz. That works for me. Now, about these fellows at the top. Here's the hard part. Who am I gonna put at the very end here? Who is the definitive greatest Disney villain of all time? Congratulations, Heinz. You're the chosen one. Then you. And then you. No, you first. Then you. And then you. I guess we'll put you in front of him. Maleficent. Then Ratigan. Oh, Ratigan. Then... no. Okay, that's it. We're done. Actually, after I reviewed this footage, I decided to change my mind a bit. Here's how the final one turned out. If there are any other characters you don't see on here, or if you'd like to share your own rankings, let me know in the comments. But that's going to be it from me. Thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.